This is the best bell. I just really like it. Welcome, everybody. We're happy to have you at Rotary today. Okay, we'll turn the time over to Aaron to introduce our speaker. And we appreciate you being with us today, Mike.
Okay, so I'll introduce you to Mike Anderson. Mike is a neighbor of mine. Since I moved to Woodland Hills, Mike has been a great neighbor. He and I have served together in Scouts. So I spent many a Scout camp out with him, hearing all kinds of fantastic stories about his time spent working in the FBI. He's a retired FBI agent as of about a year ago. For the last several years, he was specifically doing polygraph testing and has now got his own private business doing polygraph. So I'll leave the rest of his stories to tell us himself.
I'm delighted to be here with you today. My purpose here is hopefully educate you a little bit about what the FBI is, what it does, and the challenges it faces, which are front and center in the news recently. Let me explain a little bit about my background. I joined the FBI in January of 1989, and I was promptly assigned after completing Quantico, which is quite an experience, to Houston, Texas. And I was able to work in Houston on fugitive investigations, which were a lot of fun for a new agent. I worked on labor racketeering cases and also presidential background investigations. At that time, the first President Bush was the President of the United States, and that's his adopted hometown, and we were quite busy within that arena. After about 2.5 years, we had an opportunity to make a decision if we were going to stay in Houston for a very long time, transfer to New York, which wasn't a pleasant thought for us, or to forge our own path was the option that was given to us. And my wife and I chose to transfer to San Juan, Puerto Rico, which is a territory of the United States. We were there for 5 years, and while there I was heavily engaged in every manner of violent crime, international drug trafficking, gangs, carjackings. It was a very interesting experience living and working in Puerto Rico. In September of 1996, after 5 years in Puerto Rico, I was fortunate enough to be offered an assignment in Provo, Utah, which was a miracle to me. My wife is from Payson, and I was born and raised in Springville, so that's as close to home as we could get. When we got here, there were 2 other agents working in Provo, and I was the third. And I was immediately overwhelmed by the amount of work that we had. I want to ask you a question before I go any farther, trying to educate you a little bit. How many FBI agents do you think there are on the planet? Just throw out some numbers.
15,000.
50?
15.
15?
100,000.
That's actually very, very close.
That's a lot.
It's
Not really very many compared to all the places they have to be.
over the years that I was in, and I retired actually about 2 years ago, we averaged somewhere between 12,500 and 13,000 and change. Now that's worldwide. And if you put that in context and you think of cities like Los Angeles or New York or Chicago that have police forces of 50 or 60,000 just for one city, the challenges are great. And there's a very target-rich environment in which we operate. Here in Utah, I quickly became involved with 2 particular aspects. I was kind of the hybrid. There was an agent here that was working violent crimes, another agent that was working white collar, and I became the hybrid doing both. And I worked with Utah County Major Crimes Task Force. At that point in time was when the meth problem was really burgeoning here in Utah County and in Utah in general. And I was truly blessed to associate and work with some of the finest police officers I've ever known. I love them one and all to this day. They are fine, fine people. I was also fortunate to work with white collar the Utah County White Collar Task Force that was being spearheaded at that time by Doug Whitney and Jeff Robinson. And anything that we could take federal, we did when we could. And there was a very target-rich environment there as well. From 96 to about 2001, I was what they call a street agent here. I was working cases. And I was very, very, very busy. Working, I told my wife once, putting bad guys in prison is like a drug. Once you do it, you want to keep doing it. And I remember there was a time, specifically in Puerto Rico, where I was working a lot of hours, and she came to me and said, you better get your priorities straight, because you're forgetting what comes first. And I'm fortunate enough to be married to the total, and Erin can attest to this, the total antithesis of me. She's kind in every possible way. And she's put up with me all of these years. In 2001, I was promoted to what they call a supervisory senior resident agent. I had all managerial responsibility for every FBI operation occurring from the point of the mountain south in Utah. And we were covering that much country with 11 agents, which is not much. That was a challenge, and I quickly realized that there were a number of things here in Utah that are unique from a managerial standpoint. You folks have probably heard at some point in time that Utah is pretty well known around the country for white-collar crime, and that is absolutely true. Utah County in particular has been plagued for many, many years with all kinds of frauds, schemes, swindles, prime bank investments. Somebody that will come and say, I've got a deal for you, and take that with a very large grain of salt. Do your homework. Make sure what you get involved in. I also quickly realized that we had a burgeoning problem with child pornography. Utah County, under Sheriff Jim Tracy, had established a ICAC task force that was coordinating with another ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children task force out of Salt Lake City. And the FBI's version of that is called Innocent Images. And I had a couple of agents that were particularly gifted and very motivated, and we joined forces and coalesced all of our resources, and we became a very effective force in targeting not only people that are purchasing child pornography or selling child pornography, in rare cases manufacturing child pornography, but we also targeted what we called travelers. Someone who is communicating with someone whom they believe to be an adolescent over the internet in the hopes of having a rendezvous with them. I'll be honest, arresting those people was fun. And I'm being very circumspect about it. We really enjoyed that. That gave us a great deal of satisfaction. And they would come from far distances, out of state. I was amazed at the lengths they would go. In fact, I just spoke a couple of days ago to the agent that I had spearheading that particular effort. He's now moved on to a different assignment, but he reminded me that at that point in time, and this is going to strike you as being very odd coming from conservative Utah, statistically in Utah County, we were arresting somewhere between 20 and 25%. We were generating 20 to 25% of all the innocent images statistics for the country. Now, it's not that, I don't think that's a reflection of of us so much as a community here. It's a reflection of the work that we were putting into it at the federal, state, and local level. That effort continues. And there's still, in this day and age, when you can get to anything with a click, that effort has to be continued on. In 2007, I was offered a decision. There was a change in the way the FBI operated. I had planned on remaining in leadership or management in the FBI until I retired, and here in Utah. And they came out with a new program that you would have to cycle through Washington, D.C. Not too interested in that. Frankly, I'm very proud of the fact that in 28 years, I spent a grand total of 2 days in FBI headquarters. I was much more interested in being in the field and dealing with the issues in the field rather than being a bean counter, for lack of a better term. So I opted out of management, and I was very interested in the polygraph program. That is something that I had used extensively during my time in the FBI. I was first introduced to it in Puerto Rico, where we were involved in a case involving a kidnapping of a mother and her infant child. It's a very, very long story, but the short version is the mother did not survive the experience. The child, by an act of divine intervention, was discovered in a place where shouldn't have been anybody even looking. And that child is now about 27 years old today. In that case, I had a suspect, and there was a very good polygraph examiner in Puerto Rico that I had worked with a great deal on other violent crimes. And I was able to watch as he determined that this guy did, in fact, have knowledge of and had participated in that particular crime. And then I was fascinated to watch him elicit a confession that led us to 5 other people that were involved, all of which were charged, and all of which are never coming out of prison. So I had to compete with many others to get in the polygraph program. It's a very elite program. At any given time, there's somewhere between 65 and 75 working polygraph examiners across the country for the FBI. And on average, I was in that program for about 10 years. On average, we would do between 15 and 17,000 polygraph tests during a given calendar year. So that was a wonderful experience for me. I traveled around the country, not only doing criminal polygraphs, but counterterrorism, counterespionage polygraph examinations. And then what you would think would be the more perfunctory exams, such as applicant screening exams. You should be grateful that we use those. You don't want some of these people in public service. I've often thought of writing a book, but then that would be a bad idea. It would cause a problem with the country thinking, what on earth is going on here? And we also do screening of onboard employees with polygraph examinations to make sure that they're not divulging any information to anyone they should not be divulging it to. And that's a part of maintaining their clearance level. I had a lot of blessings and opportunities. I don't know how long I'm supposed to go here, but I thought I'd just mention one case. How much time do I have? Okay. I thought I'd mention there's something we have in the FBI that's called a career case. We've got about 9 minutes. A career case, that's a phrase that we use for what an agent believes is the most important case they ever worked on. I have often thought to myself, I wish I knew how many interviews I had done in 28 years, or how many contacts I had made, or how many actual cases had been assigned to me, and how many indictments and so forth. A lot. but the one case that stands out to me is the case right here in Spanish Fork, Kipling Davis. I was the agent on that case. And she went missing on May 2nd of '95, and I was up here temporarily on a temporary assignment, and I was peripherally involved before I had to go back to Puerto Rico, and it was just a horrible, horrible case. Kidnappings are hands down the worst things to work. There's awful emotion involved. That one stuck with me, and when I came back, I helped the agent that was working that case for a couple of years, and then he was transferred out to a different location, and that case became mine. And I was very, very fortunate to have the opportunity to work with the Spanish Fork Police Department, Dee Rosenbaum, Brad Stone, Steve Adams in particular, who's now the chief. Steve and I have spent probably way more time than he would like to spend with me, chasing down leads and interviewing people. But we were able to, again, pool our resources, and a grand jury investigation was initiated, which to this day is the longest grand jury that has ever been conducted in the District of Utah. We identified and interviewed several hundred witnesses over the course of that case. We brought just shy of 200, I want to say it was 178 or 179, to testify before the grand jury. The work that was put into that was a tremendous amount of work, and our objective was to identify the persons involved. You've all heard on the news back when this was happening, when the indictments were issued. And it was a great pleasure to bring what little relief we could bring to Richard and Tamara Davis. To this day, I consider them to be dear friends. They are welcome in my home anytime, and I just love them. They're good people. We were able to charge 5 individuals, and you guys have all heard this term recently, with process crimes. The difference is there was actually a crime committed, and I was looking into a real objective issue that needed to be addressed. Her loss, where would she go? And fortunately, bad guys aren't smart, despite the fact that they knew their rights, and when they were brought before the grand jury, they were given warning letters and so forth, advising them of their rights. All of the main characters decided to come in and lie. Praise heaven. I don't know if many of you know how that case was broken. The main 3 characters in that case had all jumped around on different stories. When I saw the case was assigned to me, I saw that a polygraph was done on one of these young guys, and that he had, during the course of the polygraph, after failing it, had taken a piece of paper and written down what amounted to be a partial confession, indicating that he himself had been at a location and had seen 2 other people. And then he wadded it up, threw it in the trash can, and said, "I need an attorney." Well, that's an investigative clue. And going from that point forward, they were interviewed 2 or 3 more times. Their stories were changing, and they finally settled on the day she went missing. We were in the high school auditorium preparing for an upcoming event, setting the lights, setting the sound. There was no one else there. We're in there throwing a football around. Sometimes it's just old gumshoe detective work. Went down to J-Mart, I think it is, or wherever it is they keep the old Spanish Fork Press. Pulled out a book about yay high, and Steve Adams and I are going through this book, and lo and behold, we come across, on May 2nd, 1995, there's a Spanish Fork choir concert in that auditorium. Okay. That tells us something very important. They weren't being truthful. We were able to proceed with that. We got 2 went to trial. We got 2 convictions and 3 guilty pleas. All of them have served their sentences with the exception of one who served 12 and a half years for perjury and lying to me as a federal agent and is now serving a consecutive sentence at the point of the mountain for manslaughter. Very, very near and dear. I would love nothing more than turn that light off and on Richard Davis's front porch. And I hope that someday we're able to resolve that case. No. We have, one of my last acts, and in fact it was my last official investigative act before I retired, was to request that case be kept open for 50 years. And they're typically closed within a year or 2. So that will be an open case in the hopes that there's some additional evidence that surfaces. I've kind of gone a little long. I want to take some time to answer questions.
Well, we're not leaving, obviously, so.
How would something get to be an FBI case versus local Spanish Spoke City or?
Very good question. There has to be what's called an interstate nexus, meaning that somehow it affects interstate commerce or crosses state lines. Now, on that case, the Kipling Davis case, I got a little creative. There is an assumption that if someone of tender years that's not an adult goes missing and they are not found within 24 hours, then there is an assumption under the law that they have been transported in interstate commerce, which allows federal involvement in the case. It's not that we're any better than local cops. We've just got a longer reach. And in my years of working with the FBI, I found out that when I came here, I realized there was 3 of us in Utah County. If we didn't have good relationships with local law enforcement, we were dead in the water. And I cannot compliment enough the caliber of law enforcement in this county. Find men and women who serve, my experience. Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever work, like the Communications Decency Act? Did you have anything to do with that at all?
I do not.
Okay, it was protecting online, like pornography and that type, for many years until just like last year.
Yeah. In the Bureau we have, and I'll just touch on this briefly, there's general areas of assignment. We have cyber squads, we have counterterrorism squads, counterespionage squads. Speaking we as though I'm still a part of it, obviously I'm not, but old habits die hard. White collar squads, and if you're on that kind of squad, you're really delving into that particular problem unless there's what's called a major operation where it's an all hands on deck kind of a deal, going out to serve a search warrant or make an arrest that is rather significant or something like that. I was never part of a cyber squad, so.
How do you keep your own personal life balanced when what you're dealing with, 12-hour days of horrific crime or white-collar crime? Or how do you keep a balance even in your trust in humanity?
That's a very pointed question. Let me answer it like this. When I left Springville, I would describe myself as a very naive 25-year-old young man. I am naive no more. I have seen every possible variation of evil that men can do to each other. And that's what that is. That being said, I have also seen decency that I did not think existed, where people rise to the divine and become more than themselves and will lift others out of a hot, sticky mess, to use the common term these days. And it's been unexpected for me. There's a balancing act that goes on, and there's certainly decompression that has to occur. And it's different on where you're at. As when I was in Puerto Rico, that was such a violent place, and I was working violent crimes that I was seeing death on a daily basis. Coming up to Provo, totally different matter. Not so much violent crime, certainly not anywhere near as much death, but you learn how to balance those things. And frankly, I relied on my wife. I couldn't tell her, and I wouldn't tell her what I was doing at work because I didn't want her to have those kind of issues in her mind, but she figured out that I needed her, and still do. So that's a very good question. Some people fail at that, by the way, and it doesn't work out well. It's been a pleasure to be here with you today. I hope I've been able to educate you a little bit about the FBI, and I have enjoyed, since I retired, Aaron mentioned that I have a polygraph business here in Spanish Fork. I also do private investigations, and I've really enjoyed keeping those investigational skills sharp. I enjoy interviewing people and getting out and doing those kind of jobs. Thank you for letting me be here with you today. I appreciate it.